Hello, Toastmasters and guests. I'm going to be telling you about mind mapping. Mind mapping was something I first learned about as it was touted in the 90s, but it actually goes back as we will discuss. What I'm going to discuss in this speech about mind mapping is what it is, its uses, its history, and techniques for mind mapping. So first of all, what is mind mapping? Mind mapping is not AI. It's not artificial intelligence. It is not a neural net. That's also something in artificial intelligence. It is not that. What mind mapping is a way to organize ideas. It helps you develop ideas. You start off with a central topic, which you generally write in the center, and expand from that, going out subtopics and subtopics. It is meant to be simple, with simple words. And as you go out, get further from the center, even though not necessarily graphically distance-wise from the center, but the number of connections from the center, you get subtopics and subtopics. And it is structured. And so you can see everything in its context. It is hierarchical because you can see many things at each level as it moves away from the center. It is categorized because things tend to group together in the same categories. So what are some of the uses? The main thing I like to use mind mapping for is brainstorming. It can also be useful for note-taking, especially if you have to use paper, and especially if on that paper you have to be jumping around between topics, because it is easy to insert things at various points, whereas if you were to do an outline in chronological order, it's hard to insert something after you've written a line below it. And for brainstorming, this is great. So for example, while developing this speech, I use mind mapping. I didn't write the things down in the order that I'm presenting them. I'm presenting them in a more structured, organized manner. But when developing, I could go anywhere on the paper to add an idea. Oh, I had another thought about this. I'll write it here. I had another thought about this. I'll write it there. So I find it very useful for these two things. In the 90s, it was touted for being extremely useful for everything. I do not recommend it for everything, but these are the uses I've especially found it useful for. So some history of mind mapping. We've seen examples of things that look like mind mapping, or this way of organizing data, and going back to the 3rd century. We've seen uses of it by Da Vinci and by Sir Isaac Newton. But in recent history, it was given the name and more widespread use by Tony Buzman in 1974 in his book, Use Your Head. And some techniques while doing mind mapping. It's useful to keep things terse, to just use keywords, as you can see I've tried to do here. You can freely use pictures. If you're drawing on paper, this is easier. You can use color. Many people bring many pens to use when mind mapping if they're writing on paper. If you're using a whiteboard, generally whiteboards have multiple color pens, and it's encouraged to use them as appropriate. It's not rigid. You don't have to keep lines and shapes. You can create your own shapes and create your connections in different ways. You can, if you run out of paper in the one area, you can draw a line over from another area of the paper to connect over to where it really goes. Another advantage is, I think, the spatial memory of where things are is useful. There is software to help with mind mapping. Some software is commercial, you can pay for, and there are free software. Some of the free software is available on the web, so you don't even need to install it on your computer to use. And you can convert what you've written as a mind map into an outline. Starting at the top, your central theme would become the first item, and then the areas under it, the first level underneath it would be the things that connect to mind mapping, and the things connecting to that would go underneath it, and so forth. And so it's generally straightforward to create an outline from a mind map when you're done. To give you an example, this was my mind map on paper for this speech. You may recognize in a less neat form what you just saw in my presentation. Toastmaster of the day.